Wow, attendees have gone down. Okay, they're coming in. I was like, they went down to one. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, we can get started. Thank you all for joining. I want to certainly thank our panelists, our moderator, and all of the attendees today. Really happy to have you all and grateful for our panelists for their willingness to share their experiences and insights on how to get started with an entrepreneurship idea. I wanted to share a quick update on LebNet. So I'll try to make it very quick. This is our agenda. We'll do some welcoming remarks and then we'll jump into the moderated panel discussion. So LebNet turned 25 last year and it was started by a handful of people in the Bay Area. And now look at the impact generated in 25 years with this initial thought that we have plenty of Lebanese in technology. Let's start a community. And this is the avalanche of stuff that has taken place since the beginning of LebNet. We are organized in communities and they are spread out between the US and Canada, mainly on the coast. We're certainly trying to have physical presence in the middle of the country, going after Chicago and Cleveland and Michigan right now. So hopefully we'll get some more communities established. And we also have the early in career community who is launching this event today. They're a virtual community similar to the women in tech community as well at LebNet. This is the growth that we've seen over the last year, amazing growth for the communities, events, as well as our followers on social media and people joining LebNet on WhatsApp. These are the programs that we have put together for Lebanese in tech, some of them targeting our students in Lebanon as well as our youth. And I certainly want to talk about the ones that are where the early in career community is most involved. The fellowship, the Tech Fellows program is a program put together by Aya Muallim, who is a PhD student at Stanford University in electrical engineering. She wanted to give the students in Lebanon supplement the academic curriculum with a curriculum that offers basically all the soft skills needed to succeed in a career in tech post-graduation. So early in career professionals teach these every other Saturday sessions from January to June to teach our students in Lebanon how to self-brand, how to prepare for interviews, how a guide to graduate studies in North America, how to get scholarships and internships, and also exposure to careers in tech, both traditional and non-traditional. And our early in career community certainly supports this program by mentoring a lot of our students as well. This year, we had 150 applicants from 13 universities in Lebanon that are taking this course, this 6-month course. And then the soft landing program is a great program also conceived by the early in career community. They wanted to assist students who are coming to North America with a scholarship already to pursue graduate studies. So this soft landing provides a small stipend to assist with the travel from Lebanon to North America, and then team them up with a mentor on the ground so that they can have someone to assist them as they land in North America. We have a Bayrim Award that gets handed every year for the last 6 years, recognizing Lebanese in technology in various sectors. And these are our inspiring Lebanese in tech that were recognized this past year. During this last crisis that Lebanon went through, LebNet teamed up with Life and did a fundraiser to help support the students during this school year, making sure that despite everything that's going on, the students had the support to actually have a good school year. These are the services that LebNet provides. Depending on where you are on the spectrum, you get a lot of services from LebNet, but most importantly, I take pride in us being a community where everyone rises together and assists each other. Please join us, join LebNet. It's an amazing community, mainly volunteers, and lots of amazing programs that are to support Lebanese in tech, whether they're in North America or in Lebanon. And this is all of the events that we have coming up in March. So book your spot if you're in any of these locations. Stephanie, are you on? Would you like to talk about the early in career community?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Really quick, as Janine mentioned, a lot of her initiatives. This is our steering committee for the early in career community. And Janine mentioned a lot of our initiatives like the soft landing program providing small stipends to encourage, to support students with Lebanese descent coming to do their graduate school in North America. We mentor a lot of AUB students, occasionally organize also webinars, just like the one we have today that Karim is moderating. And we lead sessions for the Tech Fellows program, as Janine mentioned as well, and offer mentoring sessions for these students. And then we connect with North American Lebanese student clubs around in universities in the US and Canada, and make sure we are constantly in touch with them and exchanging information and seeing how we can support them. So thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Stephanie. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Karim. And thank you again, panelists, for being with us today. And thank you, Karim, for organizing.
Of course, thank you, Janine. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Karim Tabaja. I currently lead strategic projects at City Football Group. We're the largest owner of football teams around the world, including Manchester City. While my work is focused on sports and entertainment, which doesn't necessarily link very clearly to what I'm doing here, I've always been drawn to the world of startups and innovation. I, at some point, was working on my own venture a few years ago, and this is how I met Anthony, actually. I had reached out to him, and he was very kind to offer his time. At the time, he had just founded DXI, and we'll talk about that journey in a bit. I want to start with a very warm welcome to today's webinar, where we'll hopefully be diving into the early stages of entrepreneurship, basically answering questions like how to go from an idea to a launched business, something our panelists have all done successfully. Understanding how ideas turn into successful ventures is not just fascinating, but crucial for anyone looking to make an impact in their industry. And I hope this is one of the aspirations of all the attendants, all the people who are attending today's call. The discussion is especially relevant for our audience, many of whom are at the beginning of their careers and eager to explore entrepreneurship as a potential path. As a member of the early in career community here at LebNet, I believe in fostering conversations that equip young professionals like yourselves with the knowledge, connections, and insights needed to take on bold challenges. Entrepreneurship can be daunting. You have to validate an idea, you have to build an MVP, you have to secure funding, and navigate early stage hurdles, which all require resilience, adaptability, and the right mindset. Our goal today, through this webinar and this discussion, is to demystify what this journey is like and provide you all with real-world advice from people who have undertaken this journey. Very quick intro of our four panelists. We have first Patrick Abed, who is one of the founders of Tracera, formerly known as ESG Flow, a company that brings efficiency and innovation to ESG reporting as a process. We also have Asil Halabi, who is one of the co-founders and chief operating officer of Bloomer Tech, a company that leverages artificial intelligence to revolutionize women's healthcare through wearable technology. We also have Alice Naufal, who is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Nota Bene, driving compliance solutions for the fintech and blockchain space. And last but not least, we have Anthony Tayoun, who's the co-founder of DXI Robotics, where he built AI-powered robotic solutions for the food industry and recently led the company through a successful exit. quite a diverse panel, and hopefully a very engaging and fun conversation. With that, to get started, I'd love to hear from each one of the panelists, asking you basically what led you to entrepreneurship. How did you find yourselves taking the leap? What was the trigger, basically? And at least Anthony and Patrick, who I know from like prior encounters, have taken very different paths. So maybe we can start with Asil.
Of course. Thank you for having me, and thanks for that introduction, Karim. So the reason why I got into entrepreneurship, I would say is specific to this company. I don't know if it's my first company. It's first successful, I should say. So I think I have the entrepreneurship bug, but I'll tell you after I exit this company. And the reason I got in is really because some family members had some health conditions that opened my eyes to cardiovascular health. And I decided if I'm going to spend my time doing anything, this is a great way to build a legacy. So yeah, I decided no one's working on it. We need a solution. I'm going to do something about it. And so I, along with my co-founder at MIT, we decided to go full-time after we graduated.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Asil. What about you, Alice?
Yeah, thanks, Karim, and thank you for having us here. It's actually funny because recently I found, I was visiting back home, Lebanon, last month, and I found my letter that I had written like an essay for college admissions. And in there I said that I was going to be the CEO of a company in the future, which I was going to found. And when I read it, I was like, I was so naive back then. That was my first impression. But I think it also kind of masked a certain type of that I felt, from a little village in Lebanon, I could make it to a US university and so forth. And I think it was maybe that optimism and kind of passion to make a difference, which first of all helped me maybe even think about applying to the US and make it here. But I would say it's kind of the same mix of things where back in 2020, it's exactly 5 years ago that we started Nota Bene. And at the time, definitely a lot of optimism, a lot of passion for solving something, and a very big dose of naivete of what it meant to be an entrepreneur. Because if I knew, I'm not sure I would have done the path. I don't want to sound like a jaded entrepreneur. I love what I do, but it's definitely not an easy journey. And but in any case, at the time where I started Nota Bene, I very much think like no one's born an entrepreneur. I think you really have to have kind of like the right rubric at the right time. And during that time, I had met an amazing set of people from my former company. And so I think I had the right team. It was the right time, both in terms of the opportunity that we were kind of seeing in the market, but also, I didn't have a mortgage or maybe kind of a lot of other kind of expenses. I felt I could take more risk. And I'll definitely say I didn't know if I have the right idea or not, but I had this nagging feeling that if we didn't jump in to solve something in this space, first of all, like it may not get solved. And I just had kind of that urge and instinct, and I just we weren't sure exactly what the idea was. We had like 3 or 4, but it was all kind of going towards the same kind of space. And I'll talk about it later when we dive a bit more kind of into like what we do and things like that. But for us, crypto was a new digital asset class, and we thought it's never going to reach its full potential. It's never going to get integrated into the broader financial ecosystem unless, we were able to kind of come and rethink how we do compliance and regulations and all that in there. And so that's kind of, a bit why we started the company.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Alice. Patrick, over to you. Could you maybe tell us what inspired you to launch ESG Flow at the time, and what did you recognize as the opportunity in the space?
Amazing, Karim. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think for me, I've always felt like I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've had that itch for a while, but as a, I would say, risk-averse person, I kept kicking the can down the road. Just it was very easy for me to get absorbed into being in management consulting, which I think many of you here, like Anthony and Alice, I know for sure, like both were consultants in the past. I had moved to this country to go to business school at Columbia. I went back to Bain. I was living in Boston at the moment. And then I moved with Bain like throughout this country, living in Austin and then Houston. And I've always had it in the back of my mind. Sometimes over the weekends, I would think about, okay, I would love to build this. I would love to build that. I started building certain things like in real estate and starting to test certain things. And I felt they were not, necessarily didn't really inspire my critical thinking, and it wasn't something that I wanted just to quit Bain to do full time. And funny enough, it actually took, I don't think I've shared that story with many people, but it took like an accident. Like I was living in Austin, I was on my motorbike and I got hit by a truck. So I ended up like breaking my hip, my shoulder, and like spending almost like 4 months in bed, like not being able to walk or even type. So I didn't know what to do. Thankfully, Bain was very supportive about, hey, like you don't need to take on any casework. Obviously, you can't type and you cannot travel. So, just take a break. So I decided instead of taking a break during that time, my executive assistant at the time, I asked her just to schedule like 100 meetings with 100 sustainability leaders to try to understand, what are some of the pain points that they're facing. And at the time, that idea had also won like a hackathon at Bain. Um, so it was like an idea that was voted on and many people won, but the idea was very vague, right? Like similar to what Alice said, it was sustainability, such a big topic in today's world. I didn't know exactly what I needed to, what was the pain point. I knew I wanted to solve something in that space because, deep inside, I call myself like a multi-capitalist, which is, my life's mission is to redefine capitalism, redefine what value means, which in today's world is make money to your shareholders. But if you're a business making money to your shareholders and polluting a river, well, someone has to pay for that river pollution, and that someone is the company causing it. And I want to create that level of accountability across the board. I didn't know exactly where to start, so thankfully I've had the support from Bain, who then became my first investor. They put in the first $750,000. And I was able to take my time in discovery meetings, and I understood that the biggest problem was extracting, harmonizing, and processing data into what you call audit-ready metrics. So the same level of rigor that exists in the financial data space will exist in the sustainability space, with the vision that they will become integrated in the future. So for me, the future is integrated reporting. It's all of these KPIs integrated into a single source of truth. And I realized, even though there were so many companies in the space, like Watershed, for those of you who live in California and beyond, none of them were really solving the critical problem, which is extracting, harmonizing, and processing data into audit-ready metrics. And I decided to just go all in and build that. And Bain invested in me. We spun out. We became an independent company 2 years ago. First successful software spin out from Bain. Bain was on the board at the time, and since then it's been history. So yeah, I would do it all over again. But it was a fun journey. That's me.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Patrick, for the story. Before jumping to Anthony, I'd like to welcome our participants to think of questions. We will have a live Q&A session towards the end. So if there's anything that really you really want to ask, just remember it, type it down, maybe add it to the chat, and then we can cover it at the end of the session. With that, Anthony, welcome. Congratulations on the exit as well. Maybe I'll start with that. I'd love to hear your story. What brought you to Dexai? How did it happen?
Thanks, Karim. Good to be here. It's so the journey with Dexai is a little bit interesting. I was at HBS at the time pursuing an MBA. I think similar to Patrick, it's been a while on my mind that I knew I wanted to go on my own and have my own business. I was with BCG before that in the Middle East. Kind of always wanted to go a little bit more independent. I didn't really mind the extra responsibility, the added work, the long nights, as long as it was for something that I can control and I can steer. Dexai, we first started Dexai when we realized that there's a huge gap in the labor market, particularly when it comes to food making. And I think for me, my background is in mechanical engineering, and so it just didn't make sense to me why we're not able to use automation or robots to alleviate some of these concerns. And so we were talking to restaurant owners at the time and realized that basically there's insane statistics. 70-80% of restaurants are understaffed. Most of them have to hire 2 or 3 times for the same role because people quit all the time. And there was just this huge class of jobs in the market that no one just wanted to do in the US anymore. And so I met my co-founder during HBS, and then we started working on a robot that can automate part of the food making process. And so you know, with robotics, everyone is excited and everyone wants to talk to you when it comes to potential customers and business leaders. And so the challenge for us was really understanding where is the value proposition that we can bring to them? What is the biggest burning need? How can we frame and build a product that addresses their needs without us having to build something for, you know, 20 years to make it work? And so the challenge for us was trying to find this balance between a product that addresses the need in the market and then aligned with where the technology is today.
Thank you, Anthony. And actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to double click on that last point around the validation process. Could you maybe walk us through how you went about that? What did it take to validate the market need before committing to building the product you ended up building with your co-founder and team?
Yeah, for sure, and that's an excellent question, and I think the question is a lot more difficult than initially you would think, right? And a lot of times, talking and asking those business leaders and those customers what they're thinking doesn't always reflect the reality of what their business needs. And so for us, a lot of times people would again take the pilot, take the test, always say yes, we need the robots, we would love to buy them, but actually going out there and doing the actual physical tests with them is really what made the difference. And so for us, a big part is understanding the specific part of the value chain that those customers needed to automate, looking at the value that this requires, trying to actually do the bottom up and the top down financials that they have. In the restaurant industry, this is a lot more challenging than you think because many of them simply don't know. They don't know how much it costs to make a salad. They don't know how much it costs to make a certain meal. So a lot of it was me and my co-founder going to those restaurants, timing the employees, trying to see what they're doing, shadowing them for as long as possible. So I think my first maybe answer to this is try to shadow your customers to truly understand what they're doing and try to do the task that they're actually doing themselves to be able to see where the pain point is and how you can frame the product to address that pain point to them. I think the second step is trying to create experiments and pilots with these customers as much as possible, because seeing how human behavior changes and reacts to your product is extremely key and is very, very, very difficult to understand. One example I'd give here is for us, we were charging the same business model, the same amount of money, but if we frame it per hour versus per meal, the answer from our customers would be completely different. So if we charge per hour, they would say, oh no, this is very expensive. And then when we charge per meal, suddenly it becomes very cheap, although the monthly amount is exactly the same. And we realized later on that it's because they compare it to different things in their mind. So when you charge per hour, they compare it to the hourly wage of the employee, which does not include taxes, which does not include a bunch of other costs that this employer has to pay. When we charge per meal or per month, they suddenly add all those additional costs and it becomes cheap. And so what I'm trying to say here is asking the questions, doing the interviews is helpful with customers, but unless you're out there with them in their location, doing the actual process with them, that's what really makes you understand how they think and whether or not they will receive the product well.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Anthony. That's very, very helpful. Maybe I'll also piggyback on something Patrick mentioned earlier. You mentioned having 100 interviews with sustainability leaders. I mean, in business school, we talked a lot about customer interviews and like the value they add in your search process when you're trying to identify the market need. Could you maybe walk us through that process that you undertook?
Yeah, Karim, thank you so much for that question. I mean, let me just start by saying that I feel incredibly lucky that I was able to take the time to do those interviews in a very like thoughtful manner. You know, I think maybe the biggest
had an accident as well. So just
what's up? Sorry?
You had a motorbike accident as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
But I think in general, I just want to demystify one thing, which is when people think, hey, let me build a company, the first thing they think about, like, let me start like putting code together, right? And the reality is you really need to identify the problem, understand the problem statement, define the solution. And honestly, the first MVP can be in Excel. It doesn't even have to be in a product. So if you think about, hey, like I don't even know where to start if you're not if you don't have a technical background, don't worry, right? And I think also we're in a world today with the power of AI it's leveling the playing field, right? Literally anyone can learn anything right now. And I think that's one of the benefits of AI as we know it today. I love something that Anthony said, which is sometimes it's the things that they don't say that is the actual insight. So out of the 100, actually 1 out of the 100 mentioned auditability. No one was talking about that 2 years ago. It wasn't defined in the regulations. It wasn't clear to people. Even till this date, I would say 99% of the solutions out there don't have auditability. We're actually the only platform today that allows external auditors like PwC and KPMG to come in and assure the data on our platform, right? And that's massive. That was a massive insight 2.5 years ago that allowed me to build this feature that now my competitors are starting to think of building. I have 2.5 years of like runway with auditors on my platform, with companies passing audit, and no other company can claim that, right? And this is why like our win rate today is very high when we're trying to close companies. So it's only 1 out of 100 said it, right? So sometimes it's the things that they don't say that actually matter. And I think this is why taking your time and really understanding the space, obsessing over it, bringing your outside in perspective, asking the right questions, making sure you have the right data set of people that you're interviewing is extremely important to get the right problem statement. And then the solution doesn't have to be doesn't have to be a product yet. It can be as simple as, a Figma prototype. It could be as simple as an Excel sheet. It could be as simple as diagrams or a customer journey. I think this is how you can start selling, and you can start getting like companies excited about your solution, right? Everyone was focused on the wrong things when I was interviewing 2.5 years ago, right? Like, because that's what they knew the market was, right? They were not able to visualize what the market will be. And I think, and I was also incredibly lucky that I had like around 6 senior partners from Bain literally acting as my steering committee, where we would meet once a week and I would just run by them. Hey, this is what I met 9 people this week. Here's what I learned. What do you think? So I felt that outside in perspective that I brought with the interviews that I was able to get, plus the steering committee that was able to come in and give me that like unbiased perspective, helped me really get started on the right track. I think that is the most important thing. So for any of you that feel, oh my God, I really want to do this, I've been delaying this for 3 years, like do not be afraid. I think, the right idea will come. As long as you are focused on a certain space, you're building expertise in a specific vertical, and have healthy obsession to be able to just learn and go deeper than what most other people were not able to do successfully.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Patrick, for that insight. Asil, over to you. Wanted to maybe get your thoughts on maybe challenges you encountered when you were trying to validate your idea. You mentioned that what drove you to the problem was lived experience through your family. Could you tell us about your validation journey and what that looked like? What were hurdles you had to overcome during the early days?
Yes. I just have a quick question. Are most people Lebanese in the US, or our audience is US based? Or is it like Lebanese that might still be in Lebanon thinking
So
of?
it's a combination. It's
Okay.
a combination usually, yeah.
Okay, so I will definitely preface what I'm about to say with my experience are very US based. I think the market in the Middle East is very, very different, especially investor appetite and all that stuff. So just a caveat.
That's a good disclaimer. Thank you.
Yeah. So I definitely feel like part of what Patrick and Anthony said resonates with me, which is that part of the validation process comes from having a strong network that's supporting you in the early days. A lot of that came for me from graduate school. So MIT has a very strong entrepreneurship ecosystem, and surrounding myself with mentors and people who are serial entrepreneurs who can advise and help, like Patrick said, steer you in the right direction was very important. I think as a medical device, so essentially, I had a couple of family members have, cardiac conditions that helped me understand the discrepancies in healthcare. And so I knew my co-founder was already working on that research at the time at MIT, but we decided to start building prototypes. So the first validation of MVP was just through accelerators at MIT. And I think we got around, just above $100,000 in funding, non-equity funding to prototype, and hardware is expensive, so we were just fidgeting and playing around and creating. So that's very helpful. And then we could at least, quote unquote, validate an MVP by taking this makeshift prototype, showing it to cardiologists, getting their opinion, and continuing to learn. And all of these cardiologists, again, are connections through the ecosystem at graduate school. And then the more formal validation process, at least for, again, a medical device, is at the regulatory level. So in order to validate your medical device, you have to go through third-party testing, get certain test results that can be approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And so it's a long journey, different to, I think for companies, the validation process for medical devices and hardware is just a different process than software. We also had to do, cybersecurity validation because we are a ECG device that connects to an app, but still, I think the hardware is much longer. So the challenges, I think, are more connecting with experts who are system thinkers. Again, leaning on our network, you have to find someone who's able to connect different dots, whether it's regulatory, quality, hardware, software. It's pretty rare to find someone who can understand all aspects of a product and be able to speak to the different quality metrics that you need to meet and continue improving on. So it was helpful to have that ecosystem. And again, I don't think we came out with the right solution from the get-go. Like, we're still improving on our solution and our product market fit. So it's a journey, and validation will continue. Like, you just up the standards as you go, continuously up the standards. Yeah.
That's very clear. Thank you, Asil. Really appreciate it. Alice, just jumping to fintech and your world, you mentioned how you spotted the market opportunity. Would love to get your thoughts on, or your details on your experience around validation.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Karim. And actually, I'll say a lot of what Anthony, Patrick, and Asil said definitely resonated a lot. At the time, I both said it was a great opportunity because there's a lot of white space. With a new asset class, there is no blueprint or framework of how basically you should transact and what you should do. So that was both, of course, a great opportunity, but also a challenge. And the early days of crypto was mostly, engineers, fantastic engineers, but it was very complex. Everyone was a coder. It's like basically expecting people who come and transact with crypto to really, or thinking almost about like people using e-commerce have to understand how the internet works. They really don't have to understand the infrastructure. And so when we started the company, it was depths of COVID, April 2020, and we were all stuck at home. Everything was shut down, and we had to start the company remote. And we were like, how do we validate and how do we do things? The nice thing is, we had our friend, the regulators, basically kind of like GDPR. They very much said, like, here's what's expected of companies, ABC. So the problem was very clear that we had to solve. What was not clear was how we would do it. And so we actually just built Figma files, not Excel, Patrick. I know you also mentioned Figmas, but we did a bunch of that. And at the time, the only place in the world where, two countries actually, where the regulations were clear around crypto were Singapore and Switzerland. And so, great time zones for me being based in New York. And so I would basically spend all mornings doing interviews with people in Switzerland, and evenings, 9 p.m. to midnight, great time as well, every single night for basically maybe 6 months. One of my co-founders is a UX UI expert. And so we definitely just spend our time really thinking about, and what we wanted to build was really abstracting away the complexities of crypto. We're like, our users are going to be compliance officers who are coming in from banking. They don't know anything about crypto, they're learning about crypto, but what they know best is compliance, risk management, etc. And we need to simplify the experience for them. And so what we focus on day one is really a very simple user experience, abstract away the complexities in the back end. We don't expect anyone to read white papers, which at the time was the favorite crypto thing. You want something on blockchain? Here's 10 white papers. And so what we ended up doing is just kind of continuously going back to the market, I'll definitely say I had a lot of imposter syndrome in the beginning. None of my co-founders, we all came from the technology side or business side. We were not compliance experts at all. We had no idea what we were doing. We sat and learned a lot, and we learned a lot from our customers. But everyone was really open to sitting with us and giving us feedback because there was just a real need in the market. And some of those customers that we closed back in 2020 continue to be our most loyal customers 5 years later. I think just because they really helped us build the product. And similar to what Asil, you were saying, I think we did hundreds of interviews then, build up, put it out in the market, etc. And we were very excited to have great product market fit. We were like a category creator, but we're able to build a great brand name globally, all the rest. But our market it's a very early market, and it's been continuously evolving over the past 5 years. And with that, who we serve continues to evolve. Like back in the day, everyone was a startup. Today, a lot of the startups are mature companies. Now we serve banks, fintechs, etc. And the customers themselves have gotten a lot more knowledgeable about the topic. Their needs have shifted. And so the product market fit that we had 3 years ago is not something that's just a milestone that you reach and you pat yourself on the shoulder and just kind of sit in the back seat. But it's something that we're continuously evolves, and we continuously have to be there. And I continue to tell our team that we have to stay 2 steps ahead of the customer, continue to do that validation and user research. We're even right now at a place where this is becoming even more pivotal. We're entering kind of a next phase of the industry, and what the truths that we knew back then and the product market fit we had back then no longer applies going forward. So in many cases as well, even though we have a very strong core customer set with what we built, in terms of what's next with the company and building kind of additional use cases, we're back to the drawing board again.
That's great to hear, and we wish you all the best on this new wave of growth. I think it's a great segue to the next section I was thinking of tackling around building a minimum viable product. It won't really be an MVP in your case, Alice, but it might be the second coming per se. Patrick, just over back to you. Would love to hear your thoughts on. You sort of alluded to how basic an MVP can be. You mentioned Excel, you mentioned Figma, a customer journey, etc. How did you go about prioritizing maybe the features that you included in your first MVP?
Really good question, Karim. And by the way, just before I answer this, Ali, I see you sent questions in the chat. Sadly, we cannot respond back. If you want to send them in the Q&A, we can type the answers and we can also go through some of the questions. But yeah, maybe back to your question, Karim. I'm just going to start by saying it was freaking hard to prioritize, right? I think the best productivity tools out there is the word no, and I think we were not conditioned and taught to say no. And as an ambitious young entrepreneur, at least I like to think of myself as still young at that point, in my early 30s. I wanted to do everything and I wanted to solve everything today. And my team was like, okay, but where do we start? I'm like, just solve everything. They were like, what do you mean solve everything? I need everything solved. And I'm very impatient. I don't know how to prioritize. So it was really hard for me to understand where to start. So just to be very concrete in my answer and hopefully help and inspire some of you out there. So, my vision is you have data in from so many systems, and then you can create any KPI that can allow you to make any decision, right? Super broad. And I think it's going to take us 5 to 7 years to get there. And I think I'm going to have to acquire 9 to 10 companies to be able to cover all of that. It's not going to happen organically. It is think of rebuilding the financial industry from the ground up, except this is even more nascent and more unstructured, right? A dollar is a dollar. Every company has different KPIs when it comes to sustainability, whether it's dollar per kilowatt hour or a dollar per waste, per site, per, 10, like per SKU produced. It's very complex. So the way we started is starting with the basics, like energy data. So you have utility bills and for the manufacturing industry. So I chose a sector with some research and just my instinct. And I said, okay, I'm going to focus on that one sector, even though at that point, none of the companies were sector focused. Second is, okay, I'm going to focus on ingesting utility water bills in any language, any format, and transform that to tons of greenhouse gas emissions in real time. And at that point, also that wasn't something, actually up until today, we're the only company that solved this because so many companies out there use like OCR, which is like optical character recognition, like Schneider Electric and many more, but none were really building language models to allow them to take an input and produce an output in real time with a very high level of precision, which is kind of what I wanted to do because this requires auditing. So you need to make sure that the level of precision is really high. And that's how I started. So I got my first customer, and also similar to Alice, like my first customer, Enersys, $3 billion battery manufacturing company based out of Philadelphia. Started working with them in June 2022. Till this date, also one of my most loyal customers. And we've been able to expand with them and expand with their peers and many other companies because of them. So finding that first customer is critical. My next thing is never build something in silo. It just doesn't work. Build it with a customer, and you want a customer that can help you build it. As Ali said, they want to be helpful because it is a problem that no one else can solve. And if you can find one out of those 100 you've interviewed that is willing to help you co-design or be a design partner, then you've landed on a treasure. And that's what happened. So we started building. They had 170 manufacturing sites. They had like 5 to 10 meters per site, and they've had like per meter like multiple different metrics that they were gathering. So we took all of these and we said, we're going to build a model that allows you to automatically convert that input into tons of greenhouse gas emissions. That way your auditor EY can come in and stamp it in real time. And that's what we built, and that's how we started. Today, this is like 1% of my product, right? We've expanded so much since then, but starting there and creating that repeatability is critical. And the good news is I was able to successfully build this and then add a few other customers like Toro, which is another manufacturing company in the US, and Lazy Boy, which is another manufacturing company, that all needed the same thing. And then we were off to the races, right? I think from there, you start building so many other features on top of that to be able to create, find product market fit. Or as Ali said, or Asil as well, we never really find it because it's a journey, but to find that idea market fit, at least, to allow you to start going on that product market fit journey.
I think that's a great way to think about it. Thanks for framing it this way, Patrick. Asil, I'd love to go back to you. And I mean, we covered some of the challenges you encountered and overcame when it comes to just technical and regulatory compliance. Could you maybe tell us about how you went about securing early stage funding? Again, as maybe Anthony said, and you repeated, hardware is expensive and just not straightforward. Yeah, we'd love to get your thoughts on that. And Anthony, you can expect the same question.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Anthony's answer. But I think there's a growing community of investors, especially in the US, maybe coming out of Silicon Valley, that are hardware shy, I'll call it, where the return on investment from a software-driven company is much more lucrative for them. And so, and especially given the tariff wars, like it's too uncertain of a supply chain market that investors don't want to take the risk right now. But some of the challenges that we overcame was essentially just talking to manufacturers. And Alice, we also secured our first round of funding in 2020, and so we hired our employees and then sent them home. And it was such a sad month. But essentially, yeah, we got, I guess, a badge of honor for learning how to work remotely. It was double expensive because essentially we're shipping product to each of our employees to be able to do product development and validation. But really in kind of learning to do that, we overcame some challenges in de-risking our supply chain. So we just had to partner with so many suppliers to be able to make sure that we're going to get product on time at a cost that was appropriate. So meeting with so many manufacturers, we were able to, I guess, hedge the risk that came after COVID, which is really an economic breakdown and some rollback in the investment community. So yeah, I think the challenges really are very related. And so long as you show grit and thinking and strategy across these challenges, you're able to kind of approach any situation similarly, but yeah, with different solutions, of course. And I will say, it sounds like all of us have co-founders. Maybe Patrick, you don't have a co-founder. I didn't understand that, but I definitely think I lean on my co-founder a lot. I think I knew early on that I couldn't start a company without a co-founder, without a buddy system. And so overcoming challenges because you have someone there with you through the tough times, through the dry times, funding dry times, but is helpful too.
Yeah, Patrick, you raised your hand. Please.
I just want to reflect on what Asil said. Like, if maybe just one thought, if you are thinking of starting a company, absolutely do it with a co-founder. I'm still struggling with the pain of starting it on my own 2.5 years ago, and since then I've added a co-founder actually. So I now have a co-founder and CTO who joined me 1.5 years ago. But I think
Well,
if I were to,
kudos.
yeah.
Kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
it's just
great.
not worth it doing it on your own, right? I see that. And I think going back in time, if I were to do this again, I think setting up the right team from the ground up. I love what Alice said around having like a UX designer that is a co-founder, having a technical co-founder. I think having actually a go-to-market focused co-founder is so important. And, if I were to do this again, I would probably try to have 3 co-founders, one very technical, one very commercial, and one very operational and focused a bit more on the product and the vision. So yeah.
That's very helpful. Thank you both. Thank you both. Anthony, before Alice, Anthony, if I remember our conversations around 5 years ago now, like you were quite crafty and resourceful in how you made ends meet from a funding perspective. It would be great if you can share your experience in the early days, but also maybe what your journey has been like from, again, a funding perspective, and maybe share whatever you feel comfortable sharing about the exit.
For sure. And maybe just starting a little bit, setting the stage here. I think if you're thinking about early stage and early stage funding, and particularly from VC type investors, I think it's also helpful for everyone to keep in mind that the very, very early stage is very much focused on the individuals and on the team. I think this is a core part of what you're hearing everyone else also say about the importance of having the right team and the right setup. And truthfully, the very early stages, first 1 or 2 rounds of funding, are almost always about the team, the vision, and kind of how everyone is thinking about the whole company and process. And this is because investors know that a lot changes. It's a difficult journey. There's lots of ups and downs, and the product will likely be very different eventually, 2, 3, 4, 10 years down the line than what you initially think it was going to be. And so investors are looking for someone who's really determined, someone who's really hardworking, who can listen to the signal from the market, who can change when the market changes or when they understand better about their customers. I think it's important to keep that in mind, whether hardware or any other business. I think hardware in particular requires a lot of different juggling and a lot of different creative ways to address this, and partially because of supply chain challenges like Asil mentioned, and I think partially also because of how the customers and the market will behave. For instance, one of the things we were able to do is we very clearly separated the hardware that we're buying off the shelf, which exists today, and we're just buying it from suppliers, from hardware that we're manufacturing ourselves. And for the portion that we are buying off the shelf, which was a substantial part of our product, we were able to get funding that is not equity funding. So basically just getting project funding or asset-based leases and funding for that specific hardware. And what we would do is we would buy the hardware on that, call it 5-year lease, build the additional technology that we built in-house and add it on top, and then we can lease that hardware to our customers. And that allowed us to do 2 things. One, it allowed us not to spend any of the VC money on the actual hardware development, which made a lot of those investors a lot more comfortable because their dollars are not going for hardware anymore. They're going to actually do the R&D and develop the product. And then with our customers, it allowed them to not pay a very big ticket to be able to buy our product. Instead, they're now able to just pay a subscription fee or pay monthly, just like how they would purchase any other service or piece of equipment. And interestingly, in the food service world, this is actually how most businesses buy their products. So even if they're buying a fridge, for example, they don't pay for it upfront, they get it financed. And so we tried to match that process with our customers, and that helped a lot when it came to hardware. We had to build some redundancy for supply chain because, again, we also were building throughout COVID, and a lot of parts were in short supply, and so we had to be creative in how we got that as well. But luckily, it wasn't as bad, and we were able to put big orders ahead of time. In terms of the other thing I'd mention here is that also people need to be very, very intentional about fundraising. Not everything is as straightforward as you would think. And one of the examples here is large valuations. And particularly in hardware, things take longer and growth takes a little bit longer. And so sometimes when you're raising at a very large valuation, it creates a lot of pressure on the company to grow even faster to justify that valuation in the next round and the round after that. And so I think being intentional about the fundraising strategy is extremely important, using safe notes and convertible notes where possible to be able to set the company up for success is very, very important. I'll touch briefly on exit and happy to go deeper if there's an interest. I think it's important to also keep in mind that there's a good timing for the exit, and sometimes the market sets the timing. Sometimes the timing is set by the company itself. For instance, Patrick mentioned that they just raised Series A. For me, that Series A raise is a big inflection point for exits. And so typically when companies raise Series A, they're getting ready to start scaling their customers, scaling their growth, and then the profile of the purchaser for an exit becomes very different. And so kind of that Series A inflection point is a very important one to considering an exit. And then the next one after that will probably be close to profitability or starting to grow the profits and whatnot. I think it's also important to have the board and the right investors around you when you're trying to go for an exit. For us in particular, it was hugely helpful to have the right people and the right support structure around us to be able to pull this across the finish line. Exits are really, really hard, and they take a long time. In our case, the acquirer was a large public company, and so there was a lot of also regulatory and compliance and legal things that we had to go through. And generally, you don't have to face these things as a startup because you're trying to run very quickly, you're trying to round the edges, you're trying to be very efficient. With big public corporate companies, it's a very, very different story. You have to look at standards and processes and whatnot. So that was a beast in of itself. And I think the one advice I would give people who are contemplating exits or going through this is find who is the deal champion on the other side of the table from you. Generally, most of the time, the acquirer in the acquirer's team, there will be one person who really wants this deal to happen, and everyone else basically motivated and incentivized to find the issue with this deal and to stop it from happening. And so find that champion as early as you can and try to make sure you and them are on the same page and are aligning your incentives as you go on the journey, because it is a journey. And I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Anthony. This was very insightful on a lot of levels. Just to be mindful of time, Alice, I'll go to you, but we will skip funding if that's okay.
Yes.
The one thing I'd love to hear from you and then from the rest of the panelists to close before jumping into Q&A is one piece of advice that you wish you were told or you were given when you first started your entrepreneurial journey. It can be one sentence.
Okay, because
something you wish you knew in 2020 before you started.
Oh my God, I may give two quick ones just because
Okay,
I'll
two
say
words, yeah.
I'll honestly say basically this has all come not through like doing it great, but actually through doing it poorly and then learning the hard way and then figuring out how critical. But two important ones, especially one to the Lebanese community. I personally pride myself of being very perseverant and have a lot of grit, and I think that's helped in many ways make the company successful. But it's also meant because I haven't been, or I guess like I realized, especially as a founder, I haven't been able to put very good boundaries sometimes, and realizing when you go all the way as a founder, you do all the hustle, but sometimes you may lose sight if you're not very careful that you're not focusing on the right thing. And the one thing I've had to train myself to think is, it's great that I'm doing all this work, but I have to be really picky with my time. And what is the important work that I'm not doing right now? And if that is more critical than what I'm doing, I just have to drop everything and go to that. So definitely think this is just very critical, because you can easily get lost with, trying to go to like accelerator pitches, do all these things, or like user interviews. Like maybe it's not 100, maybe it's 50 that you need, but you just have to be super intentional with your time. The second one I'm just gonna say, and just to leave it on a really positive note, is when the journey's hard, and in many cases you're in the midst, you may completely miss the wins. And the wins are super, super important to celebrate, to cheer on. Someone told me the other day, like, we're not brain surgeons, and that's very, very true. So definitely have fun with the journey, and it's really critical. I'll give a quick anecdote and then pass it on to the rest, but I had just raised our Series A. I went to dinner with my friend 2 weeks later. She's like, "Oh, what's up?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, we just like raised this round." And she's like, "Alice, like that's a big deal." And I was like, "I don't know, like, it was a hard process. There was a lot happening." She's like, "Just take a step back, go celebrate it with your team." And I was like, "Okay, you're right." But I constantly try to remind myself of that. And so, okay, I'll pass it on to the rest. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Alice. So celebrate the wins and try to always remember try to
Focus on the important
focus on the right
things.
things. Focus on the
Yes,
right
be
things.
picky with your time. Perseverance is great, but it can also be your weakness.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Asil, what's your piece of advice?
I really don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
We can come back to you. Okay, you
Yeah,
get
you can
you get
come
one
back.
more minute.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Yeah, no, I think maybe just first of all, I really love what Ali said in terms of the wins, celebrating the wins, because I think the advice I was given, I don't celebrate the wins. I'm just like, what's next? Let's go after it. I think if you don't celebrate the wins, you don't send the right signals to your team and your company on what's important, right? So celebrating the wins actually helps them understand what is important so they can focus on what matters as well. So in a way, it is like a self-reinforcing mechanism. My pieces of advice, I guess, just to complement Alice also and match her with two. Number one is like focus on the input, because you really cannot control the output. So focus on what you can control. And number two is really persistence. And that's one thing that allows us Lebanese to stand out, right? Like, we all grew up with transgenerational trauma. So lean in, use that, channel it to productivity, use your community, and let's all win together. So yeah, that's mine. Anthony.
Yep.
Thank you, bud.
Super helpful. Thanks both. I think for me, the one piece of advice is to be very cognizant and mindful that being a successful entrepreneur and really business leader in general requires a huge level of emotional flexibility. And I think being able to know that and be very mindful of it is very important. And if you think about it, you're a different person when you're talking to your investors. You're a different person when you're talking to your team. You're a different person when you're talking to your customers. And then you're a different person when you come home and sit with your family. And I think being mindful of that, knowing, being able to control when you can be happy, when you can be angry, when you can be sad, keeping that level of upbeat, positive attitude with your team, because they don't have to go through the troubles you're having with the customers, for example, or showing the vision with your investors, because they're not having the daily chats with your customers, they're not having the daily chats with your team, and then being able to kind of decompress and go spend some good, happy, quality time with your family. Being able to have those different personalities, if you will, to some extent, or being able to control these emotions and different personas of your life is extremely, extremely important and challenging.
Thank you very much, Anthony. That makes a lot of sense. Asil,
Okay, yeah, I'll say it very quickly.
You can pass, by the way. Like
I'll say something very quickly because it's counterintuitive. I think a lot of people think that startups, because you're making something from scratch, it's a bunch of wins. So like everything you do is progress because you started from nothing. But I think people forget that founders, hear a lot of no's. So failure in the startup world is a good thing. You learn a lot from it. You have connections even with the people who passed on supporting you. Nothing should be burnt from a bridge. I wish someone told me that early on, because I think some of the low points are because you've heard one too many no's, but really you just need one yes. So another no is just another step in the journey towards a yes, and keep that as a fuel, I guess.
So perseverance.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for, again, taking the time for this. Really appreciate it. Janine, I'll defer back to you. Do you think we can take a question or two if our panelists can maybe commit to another couple of minutes?
Are the panelists okay with 5 more minutes? All right. And I just want to tell you before we take the questions, I'm so proud of you. Your talent, your insights, your experiences. Allah يوفقكم دايما. You make me very, very proud to be Lebanese. طيب, let's take the questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at them. There's a question for, I'm going to go for the short one, sorry. So Roy Eid, I think, asked the question. I read it somewhere else. How could we help our fellow Lebanese young men and women in the software and hardware companies بلبنان? It's quite
Can
broad.
I just ask the panelists also if they can answer the questions on the Q&A as well while we're answering Roy's question? This way we can get it going faster.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Did you enable, because Patrick was saying, and I had that problem too, you can't answer everyone. Did you enable?
So yeah, so basically the way to do it is on the Q&A you can. Asil, so I already actually answered the questions that were directed to me, but if you go on the Q&A, not on the chat, ignore the chat. Yeah, in the Q&A there's questions, and most of them actually are for you, Asil, and Anthony and Alice. So yeah.
Maybe I'll rephrase Roy's question to the group. Like, how do you, I mean, all of you are entrepreneurs who are fairly successful in the US right now. How do you think of giving back? All of you, I mean, are Lebanese, I guess, grew up in Lebanon. Yeah, how do you think of giving back to people back home? From a professional perspective, just to be clear, yeah.
I'll take a quick stab. I think, firstly, there are some, like, I think part of it is leveraging the strength that you have in Lebanon. And in my case in particular, we had a big part or sub-part of what we were doing that we outsourced externally. Part of it was software and part of it hardware. A lot of that outsourcing, I leaned on a lot of my contacts back in Lebanon, and we were able to get very, very good quality and very good output. That's one way we can do it. I think the other way is also hiring talent from Lebanon. I was able to hire 2 full-time folks from Lebanon straight to here. Their experience was extremely relevant, and they ended up being some of the top performers, if not the top performers on our team, not just by my own metrics, but by everyone else in the team. So hiring folks, outsourcing, just keeping that tie. I think there's a lot of good talent coming out of Lebanon, and also participating in mentorship programs and moderations and things like that with universities and with institutions like LebNet. That works really, really well.
Yeah, I wanted to mention you're a member as well, so thanks for doing that. Thanks, Anthony. Alice, maybe any thoughts you'd like to share on?
Yeah, maybe I can add just something very quickly. First of all, I'll say I actually can do a lot more, and I haven't done enough. I'll say one thing that I did do is early on, using an accounting firm based in Lebanon to help us with our early stage accounting and things like that, where we were able to leverage resources. But I just quickly want to touch upon the part I would say regarding fundraising, because I would also say one of the tricky parts for entrepreneurs in Lebanon is access to financing and capital. And while there are obviously some VCs there and more programs, and also in the Middle East more broadly, I'd love to be more of support for people who are looking to introductions to investors. A lot of investors in the US are starting to, invest in different parts of the world and be more open to that. Same with, we did early on Y Combinator, and Y Combinator now accepts, students, or not students, applications from all around the world as well. And I'd hope, and I imagine as well, a lot of us here are very open to supporting people in Lebanon who need kind of those introductions and access. I would say that access to capital is a lot about like the networks that the investors have, and if we have access to them, then we can make those introductions.
That's awesome. From a LebNet perspective, we do team up with Life on Pitch Nights, so that's an excellent opportunity. Those happen all over globally, really. And then we also team up with entrepreneurial companies like Endeavor Lebanon to bring coaching and mentorship to and exposure to the startups in Lebanon.
Thank you both. Asil, just to wrap it up, anything you'd like to add on this point when it comes to just giving back to Lebanon?
Yeah, I will definitely unapologetically say that I tried to prioritize hiring from the Middle East, not only because I think, you know, like Patrick said, I think as Lebanese in our blood, we have a certain DNA that helps in startups, the grit, the zest for life, the tenacity. I think those are things, you know, that are cross-generational. But I think also because we are very intentional about diversity. So, you know, my co-founder is Latina. She does the same. And we try that everyone on the team brings in someone new. And, you know, one of the people I hired, I met in a playground because I heard her speaking Arabic and I interviewed her. It turned out she's a great clinical lead. So it's also about being open and talking to people, you know, sharing your passions, and you'll see the twinkle in their eyes, you know, when your twinkle comes out. So yeah, I think hire.
Thank you. That's a great way to put it. Thank you very much, Asil, and thank you all for taking the time for this just one more time, and for staying 7 minutes beyond the allotted time. It was a very insightful session for myself, and I hope as well for all the participants who joined us. Again, it was an honor for me, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Our pleasure. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.